Okay, let's start this morning sessions, start session, only seminars. There is no chairman. I'm myself chairman in these sessions. Today I'm going to talk about tensor network technique for stochastic process. Now, this means not quantum stochastic, not quantum dynamical process. I only consider about classical stochastic process. Simple question is why we need to consider about or study about the classical stochastic process. One main reason is to stochastic process has a very wide application in science and engineering sides. For example, in the high season, I came from Kyoto University. I lived in Kyoto. In the high season, traffic jam is a common phenomenon near the famous sightseeing spot. For example, near the Kiyomizu Temple, this is a very famous temple and very popular sightseeing spot in Kyoto. Car gets stuck in traffic. This is a very common phenomenon near the Kiyomizu Temple. And not only car, but also people get stuck in traffic. This long bridge is also famous bridge, a historical bridge near the Arashiyama. This is another famous sightseeing spot. And of course, recently many foreign people, for example, Chinese people and Korean people, enjoy the shopping in the popular shop in Kyoto. Behind this type of shop, we often see the long line by people. And this object is called a self-driven particle. For example, not only car and people, ribosome on messenger RNA also has described as self-driven particles. This type of phenomena is described by a very simple stochastic process on one-dimensional lattice. It calls asymmetric simple exclusion process. This is a schematic picture of these models. Each particle can occupy on a site, and this particle stochastically move left and right direction with a certain ratios, certain rates. But if this particle cannot move right direction because nearest neighbor right side is already occupied by another particles. And usually we consider the open boundary condition for this type of models, and we set the input and output rates on both sides. This is very simple stochastic process, but essentially these phenomena can be described by this very simple stochastic process. Of course, we can easily define the master equation about state probability vectors. This is a very simple linear equation. It's very similar to the structure of Schrödinger equation and other simple dynamical process. And fortunately, we know already the long time behavior of this type of system. There is a very simple non-equilibrium steady state in the long time limit of this very simple stochastic models. It's called the ASEP. And the reason exists exact solution, Derrida and his co-worker derived a very simple explicit matrix product state solution for this stochastic process. And based on their solutions, we can easily calculate the density and current of active self-driven particles. And this is most the most simplest ASEP models, each particle only moves the right direction with a certain rate, but the exclusion effect remains. And the left boundary, on the left boundary, particle comes into the system, only comes into the system with certain rates. And right boundary, on the right boundary, particle goes out the systems with rate betas. The control parameter of this system only two, alpha and betas. And based on the explicit matrix product state solution of this system, we can draw the phase diagram of non-equilibrium steady state of totally ASEP models. There are three different phases: low density phase and high density phase, and critical phase, maximum current phase. In this very simple model, we know even in the non-equilibrium systems, there is a steady state, and there is a phase function between non-equilibrium steady states. Yeah. And now I'm interested in another very important non-equilibrium system. It is called directed percolation problem. You already know the isometric percolation problem, but in the case of the directed percolation problem, the percolated direction is limited. In this figure, downward direction is percolation directions. And active state only percolate into the downward directions, and this P is a control parameters. Probability to set the open channel between nearest neighbor site to the downward direction is defined by parameter P. And if we regard this downward direction as a time, then we can consider directed percolation problem is directed percolation problem correspond to the dynamics of one-dimensional stochastic process, because if we regard this line as a state of a one-dimensional system, so percolate to the time direction is described by this very simple stochastic master equations. This T is a transfer matrix between different states on one-dimensional systems. In this case, the rule is very simple. So each only just active state percolates nearest neighbor site with a certain probability P. So next state is only depends the previous state on the nearest neighbor site. This is very simple stochastic model, but there is a very special state for this type of stochastic process. It called absorbing state. In this case, in this simple case, the absorbing state is defined as a no active site state. There is no active site in the absorbing state. Because if there is no active state in the current state, so the system cannot escape this very special state because there is no active site. And the definition of directed percolation is only just a percolation of active state. Vacuum state does not percolate anything. So if there is no active site in the current state, this state is freezed dynamical profile. So this is very special state. It's called the absorbing state because the system cannot escape from it. And this system has one simple control parameter P. If P increase, the non-equilibrium steady state suddenly change at a certain point, critical point PC. If P is larger than PC, in the long time limit, the density of active site remains finite. However, less than PC, so in the long time limit, the density of active site goes to 0. So there is two phase in this system. And the interesting point is this point is a critical point, as like the equilibrium systems. And we can define the critical exponent for several observables. For example, density and current, density and relaxation behavior or something. And this exponent can define the universality class of dp. The value of this exponent is shared by a very wide stochastic model class. So we can extend the concept of universality into the non-equilibrium cases. So this model is very important in the context of non-equilibrium statistical physics. Okay. However, unfortunately, even in the one-dimensional case, there is no mathematically exact solution for this very simple model. In the case of ASEP, so we already know the simple explicit MPS solution, and this result were extended to the similar type of stochastic model. But in the case of directed percolation problem, there is no such exact mathematical solutions. So we need more numerical technique to attack this type of problem.
Sorry, I have a naive question. What is the definition of the continuous phase transition in this case?
Of course, this is, for example, this schematic figure shows the density of active site in the non-equilibrium state in the long time limit. So density of active site suddenly appear at critical point from 0. It continuously grows with by,
for example, the second.
For example, the magnetization of 3D Ising model or something.
In this case, the density of the active site is a derivative of the second derivative of the density of active phase. It shows some singularity.
Second derivative? No, first derivative is 0 in this. And unfortunately, there is no free energy in this world. So we only define the continuous phase function on the some expression value of observables. But I think the concept of continuous phase function, which part of concept of continuous phase function has a critical behavior or not, I don't know the answer. But in this case, it seemed to very similar to the conventional continuous phase function, and it also shows the critical phenomenon, even in the non-equilibrium case. The existence of absorbing state breaks the detailed balance. So essentially, this phenomena has a non-equal property. However, we can extend the concept of criticality and universality even in the non-equilibrium cases. So I again say that there is no mathematical solution. We have a chance to attack by our popular numerical tools. Okay, in the following talk, I will introduce some numerical technique to attack this type of problem. The model is very simple. Target model is very simple. And master equation is a linear equation in these cases. So in the continuous time version is like, and the discrete time version is very simple linear equations. However, the problem is the size of state probability vectors. The length of state probability vector grows exponentially as the system size increase, as like the coefficient of wave functions. So we cannot apply the exact diagonalization technique for the larger system size. Usually, most popular, this is a list of a numerical technique for calculation of non-equilibrium process. Most popular one is Monte Carlo, of course Monte Carlo. This is a very easy Monte Carlo application because we can know the transfer matrix explicitly. The expression value of any observable about us, not any, so for simple observable, expression value of simple observable is very easily calculated by the simple Monte Carlo technique, Metropolis or Gibbs ensemble or something. But in this talk, I don't mention about Monte Carlo technique because, of course, you already know the detail of Monte Carlo. I will focus on the tensor network techniques to solve these master equations. The one is very early days, so density matrix renormalization group technique was applied to these master equations. And after that, after 5 years, the corner transfer matrix renormalization group technique also was applied to this type of master equation. And the last one is the main application of my studies. It called the time evolving block decimation method. In the following talk, I mainly introduce this TEBD method for the stochastic process. But let's start in the tensor network representation of master equations. Okay, why? Oh, sorry. Maybe I. Example is 1 plus 1 dimensional directed percolation problem. If we can regard this direction as a time direction, it corresponds to the 1-dimensional reaction-diffusion process. This is a tensor network representation of probability distribution at a certain time. And in this tensor network, there are three types of tensors. And first one is delta tensors, chronicle delta tensors. Only if the three states on three indices are equal, then the element of this tensor is 1. In the otherwise, it takes value 0. The role of this tensor is a copy of this state to another below the two indices. And this tensor, blue circle tensor, is a local percolation probability, represents a local percolation probability. Next state depends on the number and the state of previous time steps. So it can be defined by a local conditional probability as like this. The element of this three-rank tensor is defined by the conditional probability. So we connect these two types of tensors. We can define the whole tensor network representation of state probability. This part is initial distributions. Usually we consider the situation that each side are independent stochastically. So it means the initial state can be described as direct product state. And this whole part is a tensor for probability distribution. The rank of this tensor is just the number of sites in the systems. And this part is a transfer matrix along time directions. In this case, a two-step time evolution. And this part is a transfer matrix along spatial directions. If we calculate the largest eigenvector for these two transfer matrices, we can obtain the steady state in the long time limit. Not only long time limit. In the case of transfer matrix along time directions, the largest eigenvalue corresponds to the steady state in the long time limit. And the largest eigenvalue of transfer matrix along spatial direction correspond to the in the probability distribution in the thermodynamic limit. The calculation of the largest eigenvector of a large transfer matrix is done by the conventional DMRG techniques. I will skip the detail of DMRG. However, there is very technical problem about the application of DMRG on this type of transfer matrix. Usually, transfer matrix in the quantum case, transfer matrix is usually Hermitian, symmetric. However, in this case, there is no detail. There is no such a condition for the general case of stochastic process. So, in the calculation of DMRG, we need to solve the eigenvalue problem of non-symmetric matrix. It causes a numerical instability. So, if we want to calculate the thermodynamic behavior or steady state, we need very stable schemes to solve the eigenvalue problem. However, the condition is not so good for these situations. In order to introduce the TEBD method, I need to first define time evolving operators. This is a tensor network representation of transfer matrix along time directions. To construct a time evolving operator from this tensor network pictures, so simply we combine the blue and the red tensors. We define the new 4-rank tensor as like this. And the boundary is very special, so it contains 3 tensors, 2 blue tensor and 1 red tensors. But anyway, so we combine 2 or 3 tensors, we obtain a new tensor network representation of transfer matrix. So we make a rearrangement of this representation. We obtain a very simple sequential diagram as like this. And this block is time evolving operators. In the quantum case, it seems to be the 2-time evolutionary operators. But in this case, this is a stochastic process. This block represents a stochastic process. The element of this tensor is positive and not symmetric. This is a different point, special point for the stochastic case. This slide shows the procedure of TEBD method. This method is, was proposed by Bieder for the slightly quantum entangled state calculation for one-dimensional quantum systems. So at first, we need to we apply only one time evolving operator for the current MPS representation of probability distributions. So we contract these 3 tensors. Locally, we obtain a new tensor M. This tensor has 4 indices into the outside. If we can decompose this tensor to a product of 2-3 rank tensors like this, we can go back to the MPS structures. So we repeat this procedure. After the iteration for the number of time evolving operators, we obtain a new state probability at the next time steps. This is a simple procedure of time evolving block decimation method proposed by Bieder for the quantum case. The essential point is not so different. We apply the same procedure for the case of stochastic process because we have a tensor network representation of a master equation, and we already have this sequential diagram. We can regard this 4-rank tensor as a quantum time evolving operators. However, the difference of course exists because this is not, we don't know what type of tensor decomposition is better for this case. Usually in the case of quantum system, so we usually use a SVD to decompose this new tensor M. However, the element of distribution, of course, is positive, not negative or not complex numbers. To keep such property, there is another choice to decompose this tensor M. Johnson and his collaborators compare 2 different schemes to decompose this tensor M. One is non-negative matrix factorization. This technique is very useful to keep this condition for the tensor network representation of distributions. Because if the element of A and B tensor are positive, the total MPS representation keeps the positivity for every element. Another choice is a conventional tensor decomposition scheme, SVD. They compare two approach for the same case. In this case, steady state of totally SF. This figure shows the distance between the original steady state of 10 site TAZ models and decomposition of left and right part at the center site. Then we obtain a new approximated tensor product state. The vertical axis is the distance between two states. And horizontal axis is a bond dimension in MPS. Bond dimension is defined on the degree of freedom on this virtual link between two nearest neighbor tensors. And Greek result, we expect if as the bond dimension chi increase, this decomposition should be a distance between the two probability should be goes to 0. However, in the case of NMF, it converges to the finite values as like this. The reason is not so clear because, in the case of SVD, if we increase the bond dimension, the distance between the original distribution and the approximated distribution goes to 0, not 0, monotonically decreased like this. So the reason why the result of non-negative matrix factorization not so good, converge to finite values, but in the case of SVD, we already know the very good numerical scheme to obtain the singular value decomposition of any matrix. However, the numerical scheme algorithm for NMF is not so good, and there is no general effective schemes. So there are several different iteration methods proposed to get the non-negative matrix factorization for the
why do we need the non-negative matrix factorization?
Because our MPS represents probability vectors. The element of probability vector should be always positive. So, but in the result of SVD, tensor has can have a chance to get negative values. So they try to the two methods.
So you don't transform the MPS to canonical form.
Yeah. Okay. I will talk about the canonical form of MPS in the later slides. But even if we use a canonical form, the local tensor decomposition is a different problem because in the case of a canonical form, usually left side and right block contains a unitary matrix. It does not related to the positivity of total element of matrix. product states.
Excuse me. Still, I don't understand why this non-negativity is problem. So after the contractions, the number should be positive, even though the SVD gives the non-negative element for each tensor.
Yeah, of course, singular value is positive.
No, I mean after the contraction of the MPS, the whole MPS, then number should be the positive.
Yeah.
Even though the local tensor has a complex or negative numbers.
Yes.
Then why? So that's why I don't understand.
Yeah, if we use a SVD, we obtain some new tensors. This tensor has in some cases a negative or complex number. The total tensor contraction result does not necessarily keep such positivity, original positivity, because multiply of a negative or a complex number. So
the non-negative is from the truncation.
not truncation, so of course, yeah, truncations. Sorry, this is approximations. We cut to the singular value at some certain limit. So yeah, of course, we keep the every singular values in the machine precision. We obtain the positive element. Okay, thank you.
I mean, positive element of the each tensor. Even if you keep for the full spectrum, you still can get negative numbers.
Yeah, but in their numerical experiments, so if we can prepare enough bond dimensions, so such a component of negative element is very small weight. The distance between the appropriate distribution and original distribution is very, very small, 10 to the 6 or 10 to the 10. But one reason is to keep the positivity. They introduce new techniques. However, the conventional technique is better than they propose new techniques. Okay. And another problem is maybe related to the previous question. So local optimization and global optimization. Local optimization means we only solve the decomposition of these local tensors. So it corresponds to the local optimization, only just about these two sides. In the case of local optimization with SVD technique for stochastic process, try to calculate the relaxation of magnetization on the one-dimensional kinetic Ising models. Horizontal axis is time step and vertical axis is magnetization. The initial state is a full up state. At finite temperature, relaxation has exponential decays, and this dash line is the exact solution for this case. And different color means different calculation result with MPS and local optimization based on SVD. And different color means a different bond dimensional result. If we increase the bond dimension to, in this case, up to the about 1,000, then we already have a very good numerical precisions until the 100 time steps. This is a case of equilibrium case. However, now if we apply the same technique to the directed percolation problem, the result is very, very different. I cannot show the, I have no good picture because the accuracy is very, very bad. Only 5 or 10 steps. After the 5 or 10 steps, the calculation result is very far from the exact or not exact, so Monte Carlo result. So it means the local optimization is very bad in some stochastic process. In particularly the case of maybe non-equilibrium case. So we need to keep we need to keep high precision to know to study the long time behavior. We have to do a global optimization with the canonical form of MPS. I will skip the detail of a canonical form. However, if we use a canonical form of MPS, we can do a global optimization between the this new tensor network and approximated MPS by using only just local SVD decompositions, SVDs. And after a few slides, I will show the example calculation by using TEBD method for 1 plus 1 dimensional DPs. This is a density profile from the full occupied, full active state. Different color means a different parameter P. From P equal 0.6 to the 0.7. And symbol in this figure shows the result of Monte Carlo calculations. And solid line shows the result of TEBD calculations. You can see there is no visible difference between these two techniques. And in this case, the critical point exists between the 0.64 and 0.65 yellow and blue, dark blue lines. In both sides, in both phases, this new technique shows a high precision result. And the purpose of introduction of new technique is to attack the new type of quantities. Usually, Monte Carlo technique can calculate the expression value of observables. But for example, the entropy of a system is very difficult to estimate by using Monte Carlo techniques. But if we apply the tensor network type of technique to solve the master equation of non-equilibrium case, we can calculate the entropy of the system because we keep the whole distribution by using a tensor network. For example, in the case of one-dimensional case, we represent the whole element of distribution by using MPS. From MPS, for example, we can calculate the Renyi entropy of this system. So we can attack the informational aspect of stochastic process. In particular, there are several interesting problems about entropy in the non-equilibrium cases. We can handle such a problem by using tensor network schemes. This is an example of Renyi entropy. This is a generalization of Shannon entropies. Q is the order of Renyi entropies. And HQ is a second Renyi entropy per site. This figure shows the result of second Renyi entropy per site as a function of time. initial state full occupied active state. So only just one start from one state, the entropy is 0. However, in the early time steps, it rapidly grows and it shows a peak and it decays. The saturated convergence value is depend on the steady state, entropy of steady state. And symbol shows the result of bond dimension in 50 case, and the solid line shows the result of 2 times larger bond dimension result. The difference is nothing, so there's no difference between 2 bond dimensional cases. So this is the behavior in the summary limit, not summary limit, for the final result about the linear entropy profile. In the case of second linear entropy, the main part is squared summation of probability for each state. This quantity simply represents this simple Harada tensor networks. It's easily calculated from the MPS. And the result of behavior of entropy, I will talk about next morning symposium in my talk. I will skip the detail of this property, but I only mention about the entanglement entropy of classical system. Of course, the concept of entanglement is defined on the quantum system. However, now I use MPS representation of classical system. We can formally introduce the concept of entanglement on the MPS of classical distributions. And in the case of a canonical form, the calculation of entanglement entropy is very easy. This figure shows time evolution of entanglement entropy of dp in 2 different p. And solid line shows the result of p equal 0.678, and dash line result of p equal 0.679. Difference is very small. However, the behavior is very different. And each color shows the result of different system size. Most largest size is about 8,000 sites. In the case of p equal 0.678, entanglement entropy rapidly grows, but it shows a peak. After that, it goes to 0, converges to 0 asymptotically. However, if we increase a little bit p to the 0.679, the entropy has also show a peak. But if as the system size increase, the position of peak shift to the long time limit, and finally in the summary limit it converts to the finite values. So these 2 points is a deep active phase. There is no explicit anomaly in the conventional quantities. However, in the formally introduced entanglement entropy behavior is very different between these 2 points. And again, I say the entanglement entropy disappear near the critical point. Critical point 0.6447 and 0.678 is far from critical point, but between these 2 points, the entanglement entropy shows the same behaviors. And in the long time limit, entanglement entropy goes to 0. So it means the power of MPS representation is not so good in this region because, of course, this point sit in the deep active phase. The main part is a finite density state. However, entanglement entropy decrease and decrease. It means only just one special state play a main role in the MPS representation. Of course, it is related to the absorbing state. We found the MPS representation is not so effective in the case of DP near the critical point due to the existence of absorbing state. This is our new finding result.
What's the bond dimension?
In this case, bond dimension is okay. In this case, I remember maybe 500 or something. Yeah.
So I think if in critical phase, you increase bond dimension.
Yeah, of course, but it's not so clear. And we check the convergence of about bond dimension. In this case, there is no big difference about, for example, 500 bond dimension case and 200 bond dimension case.
What is the behavior below the critical point?
Below the critical point, it's very similar to this state, but there is no sharp peak. So
No
it
peak, but it also disappears.
yes, of course. Steady state is only just absorbing state. Entropy should be 0. In other words, so if there is no stochastic correlations in the distribution, then the entanglement entropy is also should be 0. In the absorbing phase, entanglement entropy should goes to the 0. But even in the active phase, we found in some finite regions near the critical point, the entanglement entropy asymptotically goes to 0. And there is another type of tensor network method exists for stochastic process. I already mentioned about DMRG in early days, but for example, a corner transfer matrix technique also can be applied the master tensor network representation of master equations. They decompose this part of master equation, 4 corner tensors, and they update this 4 corner tensor by the very similar technique in the conventional corner transfer matrix renormalization group method. They obtain the behavior of steady state in some narrow limit. But again, they suffer from the instability of convergence of corner transfer matrix because they applied this technique to the DP, directive percolation problem. And they, in their paper, they wrote we have no reason to this instability. However, maybe we guess that such an instability may be related to the special role of absorbing state in DP, as like the entangled behavior of MPS near the critical point. And of course, the variance of tensor network tensor renormalization group method exists. So TRG technique also can be applied to the solve of master equations. But there is a very big difference between the conventional tensor network renormalization group situation. So there is a strong anisotropic tensor in our tensor network for master equations. So now I propose not orthogonal projection. We may use the oblique projection for the TRG procedures. The poster presentation by Natauchi at second symposium. So she may show about our recent result for TRG for this type of problem. This is a summary of my talk. I will introduce how to apply the tensor network method for the stochastic process. And in particular, I will detail about the TEBD method for non-equivalent systems. SVD for tensor decomposition is very good in the case of stochastic process. And the global optimization is necessary in some cases, in particular for DP. And if we use the tensor network scheme, we can attack the informational aspect of a non-equivalent system. For example, entropic quantity. And we found a very strange behavior about entanglement entropy in a formally introduced entanglement entropy. And last slide, I propose the new TRG technique. We already have a very good result about 1+1 dimensional DP by using oblique projection. If you have interest about this new technique, please go to the Natauchi's poster presentation at the third symposium. Thank you for your attention. Is there any questions? Okay.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. So how did you solve the problem of the non-negativity of the matrix decomposition? Did you use the new method, or did you have some new method?
Yeah, I'm not so expert about NFM. So they use some standard method, 3 or 2 standard method for in the paper of Johnson's. And the paper was published in the 2010, so I have no try. I didn't try to the more sophisticated method.
So you still have this error of -3 something in the decomposition.
Sorry?
Like, so the approximate state is still 10 power -3.
Yes.
Okay,
And maybe their solution got stuck in the local minimums. They also show the initial state is very important.
So in your talk, you said that you formally introduced the entanglement entropy, right? So my question is, how does it have any relationship to the rather classical notion of the mutual information?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have no question about your. I have no answer about your question. So because there was no necessary to consider about the entanglement entropy in the classical distribution. So I think there is no serious consideration about the role of entanglement entropy in the classical statistical probability theories.
But mutual information has
mutual information is very similar, but not equal to.
Of course not. No.
In the limit case, so there is no mutual information in the system. So of course, entanglement entropy should be equal to 0. But finite entanglement entropy means, of course, probably mutual information should be finite. But in this case, in our case, so this region entire entropy goes to 0. However, the classical mutual information should be finite because statistical equation exists in the active phase. So there is no clear relation between the classical mutual information and formally introduced entanglement entropy.
So is it going to be possible by, for example, considering a non-negative decomposition instead of the canonical SVD?
Yeah, canonical. I'm not sure. So maybe there is more sophisticated algorithm for MFM. So
if someone came up with some nice NMF,
I see.
would it be possible to consider mutual information?
Yeah, but yeah, of course I can calculate the classical mutual information from MPS. But usually, yeah, for example, the definition already density matrix in quantum mechanics, so is correspond to this type of tensor network. But this bond should be cut if we consider about reduced density matrix and left blocks. And it means multiplication of each probability, so it's very different from mutual information.
Difference of the L2 and L1.
Yes.
How do you implement the global optimization with TEBD method?
Yeah, it is use of canonical form MPS, so it necessarily there's additional explain. So there are many good textbook about canonical form. Please again read. So canonical form of MPS are like this. This is original MPS is consists of many small tensors, but canonical form of MPS conceptually this left part is some unitary matrix, and right part is another unitary matrix, and it consists of additional positive diagonal element on the center rings. Sorry, not center ring. And this big unitary matrix can be decomposed more sequence of a small unitary matrix, but this direction is, for example, this. For example, this is a extension of unitary. It's called isometry. Do you know isometry?
Yes.
So the left part and the right part unitary matrix represented by the sequence of isometry like this. So if we apply on this side, same. If we apply the time equilibrium block at here, we obtain a new tensor here. And we decompose this new tensor by singular value decomposition technique. We obtain again the same structures. And of course, this part is unitary and this part unitary, so it does not affect the distance between these tensors and some approximated truncated state. It means this local SVD can obtain the global optimization because we don't need consider about this part and this part. This is a use of canonical form in MPS.
Thank you.
What's the difference from Vidal form?
Yeah, of course, it is called the Vidal form. Vidal proposed this type of canonical form on MPS. And this concept can be extended to the three type of tensor networks. But the original canonical form only defines one-dimensional chains. Okay, if there is no question, additional question, this morning seminar is finished. Thank you.